Imagine the deadliest winter in modern European history. Snow swallowing entire forests, ice sealing weapons shut, men shivering so violently they cannot hold a rifle. Now imagine an entire army trapped inside the frozen hell, surrounded, running out of food, fuel, ammunition, and hope. How do you save them? The Battle of the Bulge is remembered for its fury and heroism, but buried beneath the thunder of artillery is a quieter story, one of engines screaming through blizzards, boots freezing to steel pedals, and supply lines stretched to the breaking point. This is the story of how logistics, not luck, kept America's greatest winter offensive alive. In December 1944, as church bells prepared to ring for Christmas, Adolf Hitler launched a last, desperate gamble. Under cover of thick fog and snowstorms, German forces smashed into the lightly defended Ardennes forest. It was a place the Allies believed impassable in winter. They were wrong. Within hours, American units were scattered, roads clogged with refugees, and communication lines severed. What followed was chaos. Not the cinematic chaos of charges and explosions, but the slow, deadly chaos of cold and scarcity. Rifles jammed, radios failed, trucks stalled in snowdrifts. Entire divisions found themselves isolated, freezing, and dangerously low on everything required to fight. The cold was merciless. Temperatures plunged well below freezing, turning mud into concrete and blood into black ice. Soldiers wrapped rags around their boots to keep their toes from turning numb. Frostbite claimed more casualties than enemy bullets in some units. Ammunition dumps were buried under snow. Fuel frozen mines. The carefully planned Allied supply system designed for rapid advances, not sudden retreats, began to unravel. Traditional railheads were too far back. Roads designed for summer traffic collapsed under ice and shell fire. Every mile forward cost more fuel than it delivered. The offensive threatened not just to stall, but to collapse entirely. Behind the front lines, panic spread quietly through command tents. Maps showed arrows moving backward. Reports spoke of units holding with barely enough ammunition for a single firefight. Bastogne, a critical road junction, was surrounded. If it fell, German armor could roll straight toward the Meuse River. The Allied High Command understood the brutal truth: no army, no matter how brave, can fight without supplies. Victory would not be decided only by infantry and tanks, but by whether food, fuel, and bullets could reach men trapped in the snow. That is when the Winter Warriors emerged. They did not carry medals or command battalions. They were quartermasters counting dwindling crates, engineers hacking through frozen earth, and truck drivers gripping steering wheels with hands numb from cold. They fought a different enemy: blizzards, bombed roads, and exhaustion that never lifted. While frontline soldiers faced German fire, these men faced the constant risk of never making it back. Snow-choked roads became death traps. One wrong turn, one stalled engine, and a driver could freeze before dawn. Engineers worked by feel rather than sight, fingers stiff as iron as they cleared debris from shell-cratered roads. Explosions echoed through frozen forests as German artillery hunted supply routes. Bridges were destroyed faster than they could be repaired, forcing engineers to build temporary crossings in sub-zero temperatures. Steel biting into bearskin, they worked through the night, breath crystallizing in the air, knowing that every year lost meant another unit going hungry. Improvisation became doctrine. Abandoned German equipment was salvaged and repurposed. Wrecked trucks were cannibalized for parts. Snowplows were welded together from scrap metal. Drivers wrapped engines in blankets at night to keep oil from freezing solid. When fuel shortages threatened to ground convoys, priority was given not to comfort, but to survival. Ammunition first, food second, everything else last. The system bent, but it did not break. At the heart of this effort roared a lifeline already legendary before the Bulge: the Red Ball Express. Originally created to sustain the Allied advance after D-Day, it was now pushed beyond all limits. Thousands of trucks, many driven by African American soldiers who served despite segregation and discrimination, thundered along narrow roads marked by red discs. There were no headlights at night, only dim convoy lights to avoid enemy aircraft. Drivers slept in their cabs when they slept at all. Coffee and adrenaline replaced rest. The weather turned every mile into a gamble. Ice sent trucks skidding into ditches. Snow erased road signs. German patrols lurked near supply routes, ambushing lone vehicles. Some drivers never reached their destination. Others pushed on even after witnessing wrecks frozen in time, trucks half buried, drivers still inside, claimed by the cold. The psychological toll was immense. Every trip could be the last, yet the convoys never stopped. They could not stop. Inside those trucks was more than cargo. There was life itself. Crates of ammunition meant another day of resistance. Fuel meant tanks could maneuver instead of becoming steel coffins. Food meant soldiers could think, react, and hold their ground. Each delivery was a quiet victory, unseen by history books, but felt deeply in foxholes across the Ardennes. Then came the skies. For days, heavy clouds grounded a light aircraft, allowing German forces to move freely. Bastogne remained surrounded, its defenders rationing ammunition and medical supplies. Wounded soldiers lay in freezing conditions with little morphine, little food, and dwindling hope. Then, as if history itself took a breath, the weather broke. Blue sky pierced the gray. The roar of engines followed. Transport planes filled the horizon, flying low through flak and freezing winds. Pilots navigated by instinct, dodging anti-aircraft fire as they lined up for drops. Crates tumbled from open bays, parachutes snapping open against the white landscape. Some landed in German-held territory. Others shattered on impact. But enough reached American lines to matter. Enough to change everything. Coordination between air and ground reached unprecedented levels. Smoke panels marked drop zones. Radio signals crackled through static. Fighters escorted lumbering transports, engaging enemy aircraft in vicious dogfights above snow-covered forests. Every successful drop lifted morale as much as it replenished supplies. Soldiers cheered as parachutes blossomed overhead, knowing that they had not been forgotten. The risk was enormous. Planes were lost. Crews died in crashes or under enemy fire. Yet the airlift continued, day after day, turning the sky itself into a supply route. Innovation followed necessity. New drop techniques were tested on the fly. Packaging was redesigned to survive impact. Logistics adapted faster than the enemy could respond. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tide began to turn. Supplies reached the front. Fuel restored mobility. Artillery roared back to life. German advances stalled as Allied units regained strength. The same cold that had crippled the defenders now punished the attackers, whose supply lines were even more fragile. When the Allies counterattacked, they did so not as desperate survivors, but as a force rearmed and refueled by sheer logistical will. By January 1945, the Bulge had been flattened. The German gamble had failed. The cost was staggering: tens of thousands killed, wounded, or missing. The snow hid the scars, but the memory endured. History would remember the heroism at Bastogne, the defiance of surrounded units, the courage under fire. But behind every stand was a convoy that made it through, a bridge built in darkness, a pilot who flew into flak-filled skies, a driver who refused to stop, even as ice crept into his bones. The Battle of the Bulge was not won by chance. It was won by adaptability, resilience, and an unbreakable supply chain forged under impossible conditions. The Winter Warriors proved a truth that modern armies still live by. Logistics is not supported as survival. Wars are not sustained by speeches or symbols, but by the relentless movement of men and materiel through chaos. Today, their names are rarely spoken. There are no monuments for frozen highways or improvised bridges. Yet without them, the offensive would have died in the snow, and history would have taken a darker turn. In the silence after the guns fell quiet, as winter finally loosened its grip, the real victory became clear. It was not just a triumph of arms, but of endurance. In the coldest winter of the war, when hope froze and steel cracked, it was the unseen hands behind the lines that kept the flame alive. And because they did, an army survived, an offensive endured. and freedom pushed forward through the ice.